Hello, my name is Kevin and this is Wind Me Up, episode 9, Champagne Edition. Wind me up! Now, it's not very often I drink champagne, if ever really, but we've had some good news in the family, so what better wine to drink than champagne? So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about how champagne was made, because although I don't drink champagne very often, I'm absolutely fascinated by how it is made. In fact, while doing the WSET courses, the exam I got in WSET, there were 3 things that 100% certain you would get a question about. You obviously don't know what questions you're going to get when you're taking the exam, but you do know 100% you either get a question on champagne, sherry or port. So you really have to learn about those 3 things. So champagne, all 3 of them actually, I found very fascinating to learn about. So I thought I'd tell you about how champagne is made, go through the process, obviously tasting note as normal, whether or not I buy the wine again, and talk a little bit about the area as well. Now first, a little bit about the area. Obviously Champagne is in France, in northeastern France. It is a cool continental climate. The best vineyards are on slopes, because being a cool continental climate, you have lots of challenges with the weather. With it being cool, you can also have frost, of course, and the higher up you are on these slopes, the less chance of frost getting to the grapes, because frost likes to keep low. You also have a lot of chalk in the soils of the Champagne region, which helps with drainage, with a lot of rain obviously in a continental climate as well, as we all know, us living in the cool continental climate. Also those chalk soils are good at holding on to enough water in times of dryness as well. The area is also divided into 5 different areas. 3 of the most important areas are around the 2 towns of Epernay and Reims, which are the 2 big Champagne cities. They are Vallée de la Marne, Côte des Blancs and Montagne de Reims. There's also Côte de Sézanne, which is 30 kilometers further south, and then 100 kilometers away from the main area is Côte des Bas. Now there are 3 different grapes that you're allowed to use in making champagne. Chardonnay, which is a white wine grape, and you can also use 2 red wine grapes, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. Although they call it Meunier these days, I don't know why they dropped the Pinot, but I learned years ago it's called Pinot Meunier, but there you go. Now you may be wondering, how do they do this? Because champagne is a white wine. You obviously get pink champagne as well, so you can get like a rosé champagne, but most champagne is white wine. That is because the actual pulp inside all grapes is the same colour. It's gives you a clear juice. You only get colour from the wine from the actual skin of the wine, so you want to keep the skin contact down to 0, to minimum. Now France is very famous for its AOC, its Appellation Original Contrôlée. That controls everything from yield to what grapes you're allowed to have it, minimum alcohols. There's lots of different rules. They are the envy of the world with that. A lot of other countries have caught up with them now, but it was France that started all this. But interestingly, in Champagne they've made, I think most people would agree, a bit of a mistake there. If you take Burgundy for example, you would have a Grand Cru vineyard or a Premier Cru vineyard, and you would know when you buy a bottle of Burgundy, if it comes from Chambertin vineyard, you know that comes from that place, you know you're getting a great wine. Whereas in Champagne, it's the actual whole village that has been given the Premier Cru or Grand Cru. There's 44 Premier Crus and 17 Grand Crus in Champagne. Like I say, it's the whole village. So that village could have, I don't know, let's say 20 different vineyard plots, and maybe only 10 of those vineyard plots are making wine of Grand Cru or Premier Cru standard. The others are just making, ordinary wine. Not to say it's bad wine, but to call it Premier Cru was a mistake. And I can always give you an example here. This one, for example, is a Premier Cru. But there's no way that this should really be a Premier Cru. I mean, I really enjoy the wine, we get back to that, but it's not Premier Cru standard. So, but you know, there is always a good way of finding that out, and that's how much the wine's costing you, of course. The more expensive, then you know, probably a better Premier Cru. But it's a strange one that they do this in Champagne. But there you go, they do it. So on to the making of Champagne. Now it all starts with the actual harvest of the grapes. Normally, when you're harvesting grapes for still wine, you obviously want, I mean, the grapes start really small, like little hard bullets, and they're green and they're full of acidity and no sugar. And as time goes by, they get more and more mature, and you get more and more sugar and less acidity. So you obviously want lots of sugar with some acidity, not too much sugar, or it becomes jammy, although some producers still make their wines in that style. But these days you want to get it at exactly the right time. Lots of sugar, but also some acidity in balance. Whereas Champagne, it's the kind of the other way around. You want a lot of acidity, lots of acidity to make Champagne. But at the same time, it has to be not unripe. So it's very difficult to get it at exactly the right point. And that is where being in a cool climate helps this process, because the ripening process takes such a long time that you can just grab it at exactly the right time. So you're harvesting the grapes, still got lots of acidity, but they're not unripe. So you harvest your grapes at the right time. You want to pick them with whole bunches. This is especially important if you're using red wine grapes like Pinot Noir and Meunier, because when you take these whole bunches back and you press them, if you've got a bunch of grapes, it's less likely to take out colours from the actual skins. There is also, while you're pressing Champagne, rules and regulations on how much press you're actually allowed to put on those grapes. The first pressing of those grapes is called the cuvée. That's where the best quality wine comes from. And then you can put a little bit extra press on, and they call that the taillé. And they can use these two types of wines for blending later on. So blending, as we're about to discuss, is really important while making Champagne. Now, because the weather in Champagne is unpredictable, it's a cool climate, Champagnes are made from different vintages and blended together, unless of course you're making a vintage Champagne. But it's not like ordinary wines where you pick up your bottle of wine and it says 2016 on the label, you know it comes from that. That is vintage Champagne. We're talking about non-vintage here. So then making the base wine for a Champagne is made up of lots of different parcels that are all fermented at different parcels, possibly in different ways. You can ferment it in stainless steel, which is the most common, in wood, in concrete. There's also a thing called MLF, which is a process while one type of acidity turns to another type of acidity. That happens naturally, so you can get one acidity that is quite tart turning into something that's slightly smoother and softer, or you can keep the temperatures low and keep at the original tart acidity. So you can do a batch with MLF in one of them, soft acidity, and the other one. So there you've got two different blending opportunities there. Then you've got one that's been in stainless steel, one that's been in wood, one that's been in concrete. There's 5 different ones there. Then you can take some wine that you made last year and mix it with some wine you made 2 or 3 years ago, etc., etc. So you can have, I don't know, 15, 20 different examples of wine that you can mix together so you get your house style. You have your base wine, you got your Champagne bottle, you put the base wine in your Champagne bottle. This is, after all, in Champagne, this is the Champagne method, the traditional method, cap classique, lots of words for it, but this is the traditional way of making Champagne. So you put your base wine that you've blended, put it in the bottle. You then put a little bit of yeast, some sugar, and a clarifying agent in the wine. You put a crown cap on the bottle, a beer bottle cap, and you put it in the cellar and you lie it down. The bottle has been lying down in the cellar, has to be a minimum of 15 months for non-vintage Champagne, 12 months of that on the lees. Get back to that. A vintage Champagne needs to be 36 months, also a minimum of 12 months on the lees, but very often vintage Champagne has a much longer time. So in that time, that yeast and sugar has mixed together and has given you about 1.5% more alcohol in the wine. But also, what it's also done, because when fermentation happens, you obviously get alcohol, but you also get carbon dioxide, and normally that just escapes. But of course, this is in a bottle with a crown bottle cap top on, So it's got nowhere to go, that carbon dioxide, so it goes into the wine, and that is what creates the bubbles. So when that yeast then is finished doing its job, it dies. So when the yeast dies, you get what is called an autolytic process. That is when the dead yeasts mixes with the rest of the wine in the bottle. It gives you autolytic flavours. Those flavours are bread, biscuit, dough, brioche, so yeasty taste. You know, it's called autolytic flavours, and the process is called autolysis, I think is how you pronounce it. But now, of course, the autolysis is finished, and you have got all this mucky yeast in your bottle of wine. So how do you get rid of that? Well, in the old days, what they used to do is they would take the bottle, and after it's had its time, obviously on the lees, and the yeast is dead, you need to get rid of it. They put it in the bottle, and they turn the bottle. Let's see, there's a little bit of liquid in this stuff. Oh, I wasted a bit there. So you turn it upright, and you slowly turn it, and as you're turning it, you're lifting it up, slowly turning it, slowly turning it, slowly turning it. This is a process that takes like 8 weeks to get all the liquid down, so the bottle ends up after 8 weeks like this, with all the dead yeast's sediment in the neck of the bottle here. And you imagine in the old days, there's like hundreds of bottles where a guy used to go around just every day, 8 weeks, turn these bottles very, very slightly, really, really quick. These days, it's called riddling, by the way. These days, it's done with a big robotic arm where it takes like 500 bottles at a time. It's called a gyro pallet, and it can do this job that takes a human 8 weeks to do in about 2 to 3 days. So you've got all your dead yeasts in the neck. What you want to do then is to get rid of that, is you put the neck of the bottle in a very cold brine solution. This freezes just the neck of the bottle to get a block of ice, and in that block of ice is all the dead yeasts. You then open the beer bottle cap, poof, that shoots out that ice and all the sediment comes with it. Then you have clear wine again. So after the disgorgement process, taking the ice and the yeast out of the bottle, you then want to top it up again with some more wine. At this point, you can decide the sweetness level of the wine. This is called expedition, or the dosage. You can either just put a bit of wine in it, so it's got no sugar, so it's dry, or you can put a tiny bit of sugar in it, make it brut, extra brut, so lots of sugar, make it a sec, a demi-sec, or a dough. There's lots of different ways of doing this. The most common is brut. So you put the expedition dosage in the bottle, you then put the famous cork in and a wire cage on it. You then lay the bottle down again for another 3 months or so, so the expedition, the dosage gets to integrate with the wine. And then you have your bottle of champagne ready to go. Anyway, I'll get back to you with a tasting note on this champagne from Louis Bellincourt, Premier Cru. This is the Vivino rating. It's got 3.7. It's got an average price of 228 krona. I rated it a 3.9. So to be honest, rating this wine was a bit difficult for me because I don't really drink champagne, but that makes me easily pleased. I really enjoyed it. I mean, look, it cost 124 krona a bottle. You know, it was a couple of years before New Year's I bought it. It was on special offer. I thought I'd give it a go for New Year's, but we never drank it. So like I said, we've got some good news in the family. Great excuse to open it. It was really, really nice. Anyway, my tasting note. I rated it a 3.9. I've written here, not at all a champagne man, so giving it a score is difficult. But really liked it. Can definitely taste the autolytic flavours of bread and biscuit, along with lemon and minerality, wet stone if you will. It's always difficult to describe minerality. Imagine like licking a wet stone. It's a weird wine thing. With yellow melon, yellow apple and pear. Refreshing acidity, dry but a hint of sugar. Simple but really, really nice. So would I buy this wine again? 124 krona? Absolutely, definitely. In fact, I might start drinking a bit more champagne because I really, really enjoyed this. Anyway, that's it for this Champagne edition, and I'll see you next week for episode 10. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again. Goodbye now.